Thank you, Kenton. Good afternoon, everybody. Can you hear me okay? So I don't need to use that? So first of all, I want to thank the organizers for giving me the opportunity to talk with you about our model of interdisciplinary graduate education. And I want to thank you for being here this afternoon. I know it's busy times, this time of the year at the university. And let me start by thanking a series of colleagues that have been very actively involved in this project, many of them for the last 15 years. J.D. Woolforth, Lisette Waits, Joellen Force, Sanford Eigenbrod, Penny Morgan, and back here from Cartier, Brian Finnegan. And as Kenton mentioned, our project has been sponsored by an NSF initiative called IGerT, the Integrative Graduate Education and Research Traineeship Program. And we have been extremely fortunate to have two of these projects, and I want to also acknowledge the wonderful group of doctoral students that have been part of this project. I don't have enough time to give you all of the names, but many students and faculty that have made this model of education possible. And so what is IGerT? It was a program established by NSF in 1998. And it lasted for about 15 years. It has since been replaced. But it was established to foster an interdisciplinary graduate education style. And NSF did this because employers and industry were coming to the agency telling them that many doctoral students were coming out of doctoral programs in US university not necessarily prepared with some of the skills they wanted to see in newly minted PhDs. And so NSF wanted to promote innovative approaches to graduate education, to catalyze a cultural change in the way we go about doctoral education in the country, and to promote a collaborative style of education that goes beyond traditional disciplinary boundaries. And so we established our project with CATIE, the Tropical Agricultural Research and Higher Education Institution in Costa Rica, because we share a goal with that institution of environmental conservation and improve livelihoods, improve quality of life for people. And we established a joint doctoral program with CATIE, UI, in 2001. And although IGerT and the joint doctoral program with CATIE are separate programs, the two have been closely related and have made each other possible. And so our first project was named Ecosystem Management in Tropical and Temperate Regions, Integrating Education in Sustainable Production and Biodiversity Conservation. We implemented this project from 2001 to 2008. Our focus was fragmented ecosystems in Idaho and Costa Rica. We had 20 students that enrolled in the project, 18 of them graduated. And for purposes of today's talk, I'm going to focus on the second project. But it was through this first project that we began developing this model of graduate education that I'm going to tell you about. And it was this first project that allowed us to get a renewal from NSF, which are very, very competitive. And this second project, which began in 2009 and continues until next year, is entitled Evaluating Resilience of Ecological and Social Systems in Changing Landscapes. And our focus in this project are drivers of change, including climate change and various other types of changes that human communities have been subjected to both in Idaho and in Costa Rica. And so what is our philosophy and vision when we think of doing this? First of all, we recognize that interdisciplinary research is required to tackle the complex problems that society faces. And that the new generation of professionals that are going to help solve those problems have to be educated in a different fashion so that they have expertise in teamwork, they have an interdisciplinary interaction, and that they can engage in international activities so that we foster that international perspective. And so with that in mind, we developed the program with the aim of developing that new generation of researchers and people for academia and for industry and other organizations that will have a broader range of skills, including interdisciplinary team skills, communication skills, including communication across disciplinary boundaries, the ability to solve problem-based questions, because we're dealing with issues that relate to local communities, that relate to drivers of change. So we needed students that were willing to tackle complex problems and come up with solutions. The ability also to work with stakeholders, because we are a land-grant institution that has a mission to contribute to local communities and to people. And so we wanted the students to have that experience of working with stakeholders. Language skills, because all of those students that work in Costa Rica were able to learn Spanish, and an international exposure, which was something that we gave to all of the students, including the ones that did the research in Costa Rica and the ones that just went there for short periods of time. And in general, the students range in their time in Costa Rica between 2 weeks to 2 years. Now, interdisciplinary team research is not new. It's something about which academics and practitioners have been writing for quite some time. But when you try to implement it at the level of doctoral education, you need to change some of the aspects of how you go about it. So in this diagram, what we're trying to do, my colleagues and I, is to summarize some of those differences. And so in the traditional or common model of interdisciplinary work, you first identify a problem in consultation with stakeholders in some cases that needs an interdisciplinary team. And then you go about and establish an interdisciplinary team by putting together the disciplines of people that can contribute to that analysis of the problem. And then you engage in the process of interdisciplinary research. And in some instances, you need to redefine that team. Now, in the framework of doctoral education, we cannot exactly do it that way, because doctoral students have to have an active role in defining the research problems, in defining the research questions they're going to tackle. We have to give them the room to come up with that. We cannot hand them the complete project. And so what we did is we faculty selected a general problem area, and then we assembled interdisciplinary teams of graduate students, and then let the students define the problem. So in this case, the team came first and the problem came second. And that problem was defined by the students in consultation with faculty after interacting with local communities and engaging in literature review, etc. And so in some instances, the problem had to be redefined by the students because it wasn't feasible for the team, or because there wasn't enough disciplinary coverage in the team, or because a new problem came up that was more interesting. And so the point we're trying to make with this figure is that if you're going to, in our view, if you're going to engage in interdisciplinary doctoral education, you have to somehow change the way you go about it to give the students the room to define the problems. Once all of that is done, that process of interdisciplinary study is very similar between the two models, and it leads to enhanced understanding of a problem and potential solutions and communication of the findings. Now, in the current project, we have 22 students that are funded by our project and 2 by CATIA in Costa Rica, and we have over 30 faculty from both institutions, including 14 different academic units in 4 colleges here at UI. So it's a broad project. And we divided the students into 6 interdisciplinary teams. 3 of them are based here in Idaho, and 3 are based in Costa Rica. And in general, we gave them the names of the geographical regions or the ecosystems where they were going to be working in. And so the 3 teams in Idaho are the Palouse Prairie team, working in the Palouse, the Northern Rockies team, working in the Northern Rockies, and the sagebrush team, which works in Southern Idaho. And the 3 teams in Costa Rica all work in biological corridors, which are corridors that are established to not only provide links for biodiversity to have connectors, but also to enhance the livelihoods of people. All of these students were in the joint doctoral program with Katia. And they were the Tauri Alpha team based in the Volcanica Central Talamanca corridor, the Sarapiquí team based in the San Juan La Selva corridor, and the Nicoya team based in the Chorotega biological corridor. And so you might wonder, well, what do Costa Rica and Idaho have in common? There is very little in common between these 2 places. But in reality, there is a lot in common between these 2 places, because in all instances, we're dealing with what we call coupled natural human systems, or they can be called coupled social ecological systems. And these are systems in which humans and nature are very closely linked, and there are feedbacks between humans and the natural environment and the working environments in which they live. And whatever humans do influences nature, and what nature is also influencing humans. So in these particular areas where we work, both in Costa Rica and Idaho, they have all suffered from non-sustainable management practices. They have experienced habitat destruction, which has affected the biodiversity of the regions. They are being subjected to climate-related changes, among other things. They've also been changes in economic structures and also in policies that the governments implement, which have had an impact on people. There's been human migration, as well as impacts on the livelihoods of people. So again, these areas have a lot in common. And so in our program, what we decided to do was that the students will have to complete their disciplinary requirements in their respective academic units, but also an interdisciplinary curriculum that will include biological, physical, and social sciences. And the students work in teams, as I mentioned the teams, and they develop interdisciplinary research proposals that address link research questions. And I'm going to tell you a little bit more about that now. So one of the key elements of the project, of this educational model, is that as a result of the joint work that the doctoral students do, they are required to develop joint dissertation chapters. So the dissertations are going to have chapters that are jointly written by a group or a team of individual students. The dissertations also have disciplinary chapters that make them unique, but at least one of the chapters has to be in common. And those dissertation chapters eventually lead to journal papers in which multiple students contribute. The students also interact with other students in the program by participating in a series of events that helps them understand principles, issues, and increase their skills on interdisciplinarity. This is a picture of the team in Costa Rica when we were there for our annual meeting in 2013. Now, we also set up what we call a summer immersion course. And for this, it lasted 3 weeks. And I'll tell you a little bit more about it in a minute. But in addition to that, we have an interdisciplinary research methods class which was taught for 2 years in a row. And all of the students had to take it together, and they worked together as a team in the class. And each lasted a year, each research methods class. So it was the fall semester followed by the spring semester. And we had a series of seminar courses, including one on resilience, another on cross-disciplinary research, one on ethics. And the students had the opportunity to engage in a statistics workshop for interdisciplinary data management. And there is also an interdisciplinary component that we developed for the prelim exams of all of the students to ensure that they were well versed in the interdisciplinary literature and in the philosophical underpinnings of interdisciplinarity. And so during the summer immersion course, the students visited the potential research sites and began a series of meetings with stakeholders to define the research issues. And they began gathering ideas and examining the literature to define the team's agenda. And they also listened to presentations by the stakeholders. And then after the summer immersion course, as I said, we had the methods class. And as a combination of the two courses, we first engaged in a 2-day retreat-style team building exercise, because in order to ensure that those teams are going to work well together, we have to be sure that they get along with each other. That's critical for a team to work. And so we provided this environment away from UI, where they had the opportunity to do team building. They took the toolbox exercise, which was an exercise that we developed as part of a first project to promote communication across disciplines. And together with the faculty, they began exploring the disciplinary and interdisciplinary research questions that they wanted to address. And the other thing that we asked them to do, both beginning in the summer immersion and then continuing in the methods class, was to develop conceptual models to help guide their research. And those conceptual models are very, very useful, because then they can see the whole picture, and they can start changing that picture as they have a better idea of what their research is going to be on. And they learn about interdisciplinary methods and the philosophical and theoretical underpinnings of other disciplines of students in their team, so that they will be able to communicate across different disciplines. And then they develop interdisciplinary research proposals that we faculty evaluated. The other thing that all of the teams did was interact with stakeholders, as I mentioned. That began during the summer immersion course, but their connections to local communities continued throughout their time in the program, so that they presented their research proposals to the local communities. They then conducted workshops with the local communities, and at the end of their projects, in many instances, they presented, or practically all instances, either as a team or as individuals, they presented the results of their finding, so that the local communities could utilize this information, which could benefit them as individuals and also the policymakers in the different regions. And the students very much like that, working with the local communities. We also have these annual meetings that I mentioned, and they alternated between Costa Rica and Idaho. And one of the useful things of that was that all of the students could come together. Most of the time, the students were working as the individual teams, which were 3 to 4 students. But then during the annual meeting, all of them came together with the faculty. They presented the results of their disciplinary work, their interdisciplinary work, and they participated with faculty in workshops and exercises to better understand interdisciplinarity and to think on how to integrate knowledge across different teams. And we also did field visits, so that all of the students were able to present to the other students the research they did right there in the different fields where they operated. And so how do we ensure that teams are effective in a very demanding program like this? Well, one of the first things we did is that we conducted a team exercise during the recruitment interviews. And so in all instances, for the last project for which we recruited 22 students, we had about 100 applicants. And so we selected the top 30 applicants over a 2-year period and flew them to UI and brought them here for a 3 to 4 day interview process. And as part of that interview process, we gave them a hypothetical case study and asked them to answer a series of questions and to then make a presentation to the faculty on that particular case study. And we then judged their ability to work as part of a team, and we also asked them to complete an anonymous survey where they told us what was their experience working with other team members of the team they were assigned, so that we could start getting an idea of who was a good team player and who wasn't, because otherwise it wasn't going to work. We also assigned one faculty member to each team that was going to be the leader. The teams in Costa Rica sometimes have two, so they had a co-leader. And these faculty members were members of a steering committee of a project. We had regular team meetings between the students and faculty or the students alone. At the peak of the research period, the students were meeting as often as every week. Later on, they might meet once a month. But to this day, 5 years into the project, the students are still meeting because they're now working on their publications. And not only do they make the commitment to continue to work together, even after they graduate, they continue to do it because they want those publications out. And we have managed to sustain that effort. They also did joint presentations at professional meetings. So they attended meetings that were not necessarily in their own discipline, but meetings that welcome interdisciplinary presentations or that were broader in nature, and in some instances they presented as a team. And they also presented as teams at every one of the annual meetings. So they learned to speak each other's languages. They also developed joint grant proposals. And we did this for multiple reasons. A practical one, IGerT only supported 2.5 years of their funding, so the students had to identify other sources of funding. Another one is we wanted to give the students the skills on how to develop research proposals, grant proposals for funding, because that's the way not only academia works, but many NGOs. And so the students wanted to come out with that experience. In many instances, or in most instances, the students either found individual or team proposals that were developed, that were funded, and allowed them to continue their work or to complete their work. And so the way we promote interdisciplinarity is one that is slightly different from other teams or from other groups, and we recognize that there are many different ways of promoting interdisciplinarity. But in our case, we require that students collaborate throughout the tenure in the program. As we call it, once an IGerT, always an IGerT. And we offer workshops and seminars on collaborative research across teams. In many instances, the students actually develop these workshops. And the students also engage in interdisciplinary teamwork by interacting with multiple faculty. And the faculty made a commitment that they were going to spend extra time, because when you're working with a team of students, that actually requires more of your time than when you're working with a single student. So the faculty, we were also a team. And so our interdisciplinary educational model promotes team members that can work across multiple disciplines rather than a single individual that has knowledge in several disciplines and conducts research in several disciplines. Our students have knowledge on multiple disciplines, but they learn to work as a team. Because in real life, most of the time, that's how we work. You seldom find in academia, for example, or in industry, people operating on their own. Those days are gone. And so team effort is the key. And so let me briefly mention the 6 teams, because I do want to give them recognition. The Northern Rockies team, we have here Kerry Kemp, Gerard Blades, and Zion Claus, and their project was on understanding, communicating, and adapting to climate change in the U.S. Northern Rockies. They had expertise in ecohydrology, social psychology, fire ecology, and various other disciplines. And so they actually ended up developing 3 papers, one on indicators of climate change in Idaho, one on how forest managers respond to climate change signs, and another one on managing for climate change on federal lands. And each one of the students took a lead in one of the interdisciplinary papers, and we use a series of different types of methods, from public workshops to data analysis to surveys and interviews in order to do this. Another team, the San Juan La Selva team, this one worked in Costa Rica, and we have here Ricardo Santiago, Adina Chain, Kate Cleary, Irene Shaver, and Anderson Fiorenzo. And their research was on quantifying the linkages among land use policies, agricultural intensification in northeastern Costa Rica, habitat fragmentation, and social ecological systems. And I know that sounds like a mouthful, but we just published a paper earlier this year on this very topic. And they combine multiple disciplines from forest ecology to political ecology to conservation genetics in the team. And again, the paper that was published combined a regional scale policy effects assessment as well as a local scale resilience analysis by using various methods to do that. And the second project in which the students are working now is on scenario modeling to look at the future scenarios of land uses in the region. And they developed a series of scenarios of future land uses and presented them back to the local communities in a series of workshops, and then came back and incorporated the information from the local community to change the scenarios again. And we're now working on this paper. And briefly, another team, the Nicoya team, worked on understanding policy impacts on ecosystem services in the Nicoya Peninsula. Again, they combine many different disciplines from ecohydrology to entomology to economics. And they also developed 3 papers, one on using beekeeper local knowledge to understand ecosystem service provision, another one on scaling up variation in functional traits to inform ecosystem services management, and another one on alleviating water scarcity in a rural area in Costa Rica, and how to consider co-benefits from reforestation in water and valuing ecosystem services. And those papers are, 2 have been submitted, 1 is under development. The other 3 teams, I don't have time to give you a lot of details, I'll just mention them. The Tauri Alpha team work on reconciling resource management with the landscape, and they develop an approach to identify scale misfit in a social ecological system. And so here we have Levi Kiesecker, Taylor Joyal, Kristen Welsh, and Renee Hill. And again, they combine multiple disciplines, ecohydrology, water resources, social sciences. The other team that worked in Idaho was the sagebrush team, which engaged into a social ecological impact assessment for public land management. And we had in that team 4 students, Joe Holbrook, who just defended, Alex Suazo, Ryan Niemeyer, and Amanda Bentley, which is defending in a couple of weeks. And they combine, again, multiple disciplines from rural sociology to wildlife ecology to plant ecology. And finally, the Palouse team, which worked here in the Palouse region, evaluated ecosystem services from Palouse prairie remnants. And in this team, we have Chris Bauer, a soil scientist, Kevin Decker, an economist, Paul Rhodes, an entomologist, and Cliff Davis, a plant ecologist. And so they are also working on several interdisciplinary presentations. So you might ask, did this work? I mean, what do the students think about this model? And so we actually conducted a survey with the students. And really briefly, this is 5 different activities in which the students engage, and a rating scale of 1 to 7, with 7 the highest rating they will give it. In general, they have very positive experience with their student team and also their faculty team. But it's interesting that their perception of communication at the start of a program They gave it a ranking of about 3.5 in terms of their ability to communicate, but by 3 to 4 years into the program, that was over 6. So that is telling us that the students felt like they were able to communicate better across disciplines and also deliver their message.
Was that first survey at the start, communication at the start of the program, done at the same time as the 3 to 4 year, or is it done?
We have data for both point periods. Yeah, data at the start of a program and data when they told us how they felt 3 to 4 years, where they were at the start and where they were afterwards. But great point. And in terms of confidence of publishing those interdisciplinary papers that we require from them, all of them felt pretty confident that they could do that. Another way of thinking of, so what do the students think? Again, a rating scale of 1 to 7, where 1 is not very important to 7 is very important. And not surprisingly, required coursework had the lowest rating of only 4. But several of the other elements that we had in the program, like the annual meeting, the informal team time, team meetings, were pretty highly ranked. And the most important for many of them was the interdisciplinary chapter. They told us that that's one of the things that kept them together, knowing that they had to produce that chapter, those publications. And as you probably noticed, I mentioned some of the teams actually ended up developing three interdisciplinary chapters or papers. So they really took it to heart in doing this. And so we can ask, did it work? There are many different measures for evaluating graduate programs. One of them we can think about is retention rates and graduation rates. I can say our retention rates were 90 and 96% for the first and second project, respectively. And the graduation rate for the first program was 90%. Similar graduate programs in the US have, doctoral programs have a graduation rate of 54%. So when we accomplish a 90% graduation rate, that tells us that we're doing the right thing. We firmly believe that sense of belonging that we created, that commitment to each other that the students made a huge difference. Of our first project, 9 of them are in academia, of the 18 students that graduated. The others are with state or international agencies or non-governmental organizations. From the 7 students that have graduated in the second project, 3 are now in academia. The others are with similar organizations. We have 4 more graduating this semester and 11 graduating next academic year or next year. And so the other thing is that many of the students, of the graduates, tell us that the interdisciplinary experience that they acquired through the program, the team skills that they acquired through the program, and the professional development opportunities were really instrumental in securing and being successful at the jobs they have now. And finally, many of them are engaged in interdisciplinary research and education projects. So they have become a new generation of scientists that are promoting this style of work. And with that, I want to once again thank my wonderful students and colleagues that made this project possible. And I'll be happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you very much. Please.
Several of the projects had non-IGerT participants. How did you recruit those? How did that happen?
We had some non-IGerT participants at CATIE, because we work with them. We were able to work with CATIE to secure funding for Latin American students to work with some of the teams that were working in Costa Rica. Those students are in the joint doctoral program with CATIE and Idaho, and so they are UI students, but they are Latin American students that were not funded by IGerT. IGerT only funds American students. That was a requirement of the project. So we figured out ways on how to integrate Latin American students to those teams, which was also a way of promoting more cultural diversity. And that's one way we did it. In terms of faculty, some faculty were not necessarily as involved in IGerT as others, but they had a student in the program, so they committed time to working with the students. Does that answer your question?
I think so. So they were part of the team all out. They did everything the whole team did.
Yeah, those two students, for example, that were funded by Katia and UI together, they took the methods class and they work in developing the interdisciplinary proposal together. They didn't spend as much time in the field as the rest of the team members, but they are co-authors of the papers because they contributed to them. And as a matter of fact, the two of them are women also. So we had gender diversity that was very important for us to have.
So we just interviewed and hired a bunch of postdocs to engage in interdisciplinary work, and many of them already had. And when we asked in the interview process all these candidates, the most challenging part of interdisciplinary work, to a person, they all talked about writing. Writing manuscripts as an interdisciplinary work. So is it your perception that that's one of the biggest challenges? And if so, how do you handle things like arguments over authorship or who should be on a paper, who should be first author, those things?
Yeah, that's a great question. And so we began those discussions pretty early and encouraged them to start discussing among themselves very early on how they were going to establish the order of authorship. And we specifically told them, try not to do it in alphabetical order, because that doesn't necessarily pay off for the person that ends up doing most of the work. During the ethics course that I taught, we also spent a lot of time on professional writing and ethical issues in authorship, and we discussed that again. And we guided them through the team meetings, and several of the teams used a model where they were going to do at least 3 projects or 3 products, so that each team member will have 1 first author paper and 2 papers that they will be second or third. And so they felt a little bit more satisfied that way. In the others, they decided that it was going to be based on the nature of the project and who took the lead. Several of the projects had a strong social science component that required one of the social scientists to take the lead in developing it, so that person ended up being the first author. But in general, there was not a lot of fighting. In the first project, there was more fighting than in this one. I think the faculty, we got better at it also. It's just like your second child is always easier to raise than the first. Usually. I shouldn't generalize. But that's the way we did it. And now the faculty are also co-authors of those papers. So in general, what we said is, well, we want the faculty to be co-authors, but also to contribute to the development of the papers, to put the time mentoring the students and the teams. But writing as a team is difficult. As a matter of fact, that bioscience paper to which we submitted this model, we wrote that as a team. And believe me, it's a lot easier to write a paper on your own than by committee. So yes, we in faculty, we experience that. There's no doubt that is a very strong challenge. But on the other hand, when they come out into the real world, in academia or industry or whatever, they are going to have situations where they're writing together with other people. So learning those skills is useful. And at the beginning, what many of them did is each one contribute a section of a paper, and then they will appoint somebody that will go over the paper and ensure that it had a unified voice, so that it didn't come across as written by 4 different people. And so it was multiple iterations. Some of these manuscripts, we probably had 15 versions of them before we sent them out. Yes?
Given the stunning difference in success between the traditional PhD program and this, how do you move to this sort of a model without the infusion of cash that you had through the privilege of NSF?
That is a great question. And I will have to be honest and tell you that I don't exactly know. I think that institutions have to make that commitment to put in extra money to really provide the opportunity and the experience for students to engage in interdisciplinary teamwork. You know, the project that we have in Ecuador that you're part of, We're doing some of this with undergraduate students, so we're starting them even earlier. But this is also NSF funded. And so we believe that institutions also have to make a commitment and come up with some of the money and the structures and the way of incentivizing the faculty to make this possible. What the NSF money did wasn't necessarily to provide money for the research, because each one of these students got only like $10,000 for research from our project. The rest they have to generate with their major professors and through other sources. What we did is we have very good stipends that were mandated by NSF, $30,000 a year for a doctoral student, and that allows us to bring highly competitive students that turn down Stanford or Cornell or Berkeley or whatever to be here and be part of this, because they wanted an interdisciplinary team experience. And they also wanted the opportunity to work in the tropics. Many of them told us that. That was a strong attraction of the program. So I would say it's a combination of ways. You know, there has to be buyout on the part of the institution, which I would like to see more about at UI, but I will not comment further on that one. Yes.
How are we going to keep it going after the IGerT funding ends?
Great question. NSF also asked us that question, how are you institutionalizing the project? And this idea of doing interdisciplinary teamwork and having joint chapters in dissertations, other groups at UI are using that system. And the Water Resources IGerT is using some of the things that we developed in their IGerT, which was funded 2 years ago. So they are utilizing some of our methods, including the toolbox exercise. And so that's a way that we think it was somehow institutionalized. But there is a tremendous level of altruism when you do this, because on the part of faculty, I would say, we go way beyond what is expected of us in order to implement a project like this. And sometimes the incentives are not there on the part of the institution. And so how to keep it going is not always easy. One of the ways we're trying to ensure that it continues is, one, the 40 graduates that we have or will have from the program, you know, they'll carry the banner. The faculty have developed new projects that are the result also of the interactions that came about as a result of this program. The work that I'm involved with Frank in Ecuador and Lisette Weiss and David Roon, I would have never worked with them in Ecuador if it wasn't because I got to know them through IGerT. And so that's a way of also institutionalizing it. You establish new connections among the faculty. Like in all projects, I mean, you are very experienced in doing that kind of thing at UI. You bring faculty together, you give them the opportunity to work together. They're spin-offs. And so that has happened in here. And very successfully, I will say, in some instances. But when we publish that paper, we would like other institutions also to try the model. That would be another way of at least institutionalizing it. But we'll see. I firmly believe that it's a great way of going about promoting teamwork and interdisciplinary work and educating students on how to do it. But it's not easy.
How did the partnership with Katie begin originally, and how has it worked from the Costa Rican side of the relationship?
That relationship came about when a group of faculty from UI, led by Chuck Hatch, who was then the Dean of CNR, went to Costa Rica because the Costa Ricans wanted to establish a joint doctoral program with a US university. So this institute, Katie. And so they actually had groups of different universities come over and talk with them. And one of the things they liked of UI was the fact that we had both a College of Natural Resources and a College of Agricultural and Life Sciences. And they have strong expertise in both areas. And through the conversations we had with them in 1999, we then spent 2 years developing this concept of how the joint doctoral program was going to work. It has been successful. We have had some difficulties. The cultures of the two institutions are different. The ways people go about things. They also have had a lot of faculty turnover, which has affected our interactions with them. Not that we don't have faculty turnover at UI, but in their case it was even more acute. Some of them were more committed than others, but we tried to find, for all of the students in the joint doctoral program with Katia, which meant like half of the students in the IGerT project, they have to have a co-mentor in Costa Rica. And so usually that person works closely with a student when they're based down there and helps them identify resources and field sites and assistance and helps them define the research as it relates to the nature of Costa Rica. So they made a lot of contributions in that regard. And we are continuing the joint doctoral program. As a matter of fact, there is a lot of, the program now includes not just those two colleges, but the College of Science and other colleges are part of the joint doctoral program with Katia. And, but we are going to go down in the number of students we have in the program. How to sustain that, it will probably be maybe 5 students a year at the most.
Thank you all for coming today. I hope you'll come back next week and hear Bill Rember speak about the paleobotany of Lake Archaea. You're welcome to continue the conversation with our speaker as the program formally adjourns, but let's thank her again for her time and expertise.
Thank you.